In a far corner of the galaxy, Paco, a small and delicate alien pilot, makes a desperate journey to Earth in search of a species from ancient legends, humans. Stories say they once stood as guardians of the weak, unmatched in power, feared even by the oldest civilizations. But when Paco arrives, Earth is empty of people, preserved like a sacred museum. Instead, he finds an unyielding wall of AI warships guarding it. To save his enslaved people from a brutal conqueror, Paco must convince these unseen humans to awaken. What he discovers will change his understanding of power, life, and the galaxy itself, because the humans are not gone. They are waiting, dormant, and when they rise, the universe remembers why they were feared. Through the neural interface of his ship, Paco felt every shard of ice drifting past Pluto's dark horizon. His awareness extended in all directions, not through eyes, but through sensors and signals that painted a perfect sphere of reality around him. Every faint ripple of radiation, every slow swirl of magnetic current reached his mind as clearly as color. There was no need for windows when he could feel space itself. His vessel was small, silver-white, and shaped in smooth curves like the flowing designs of his people, the Cinerans. Once, its hull had been flawless. Now, scars from his long journey marred its surface. No lights blinked outside, they were useless to a pilot who navigated by thought. Paco's slender blue-skinned body floated inside the chamber of suspension gel, each movement slow in the fluid that protected him during brutal high-speed maneuvers. His fingers, built for delicate work, drifted aimlessly. His people had not been built for strength. The massive fur-covered Carano, who now ruled over them, were creatures of muscle and raw force. Cinerans had evolved for perception, not war. And so, in desperation, Paco had crossed half the galaxy, chasing the oldest and most impossible of stories, the legends of the humans. The first trace of their presence came at the edge of Pluto. Beneath its endless frost lay the unmistakable marks of mining operations, the patterns sharp and geometric, carved with skill far beyond even the best Cineran engineering. Paco recorded everything, forcing his mind to stay linked despite the throbbing ache building behind his eyes. At Neptune, the signs grew stranger. Automated drones glided through the planet's upper atmosphere, so perfectly built that his sensors almost missed them. They did not acknowledge his presence, their movements smooth and eternal, as if they had been carrying out their duties for centuries without pause. Saturn's rings shimmered with impossible structures, thin sheets spread across thousands of kilometers, harvesting energy from the planet's magnetic field. They looked fragile, yet his readings told him they were stronger than battleship armor. Jupiter's orbit revealed satellites arranged in patterns that might have been scientific experiments or art, the scale so vast that it bent his sense of reason. Then came Mars. Cities lay silent beneath the dusty sky, their towers whole and untouched. No signs of battle, no damage. It was as though their people had simply stepped away one day and never returned, leaving their machines to preserve the cities like museum pieces. By the time Earth came into view, Paco's hope was dying. It shone like a jewel in the void, its oceans deep and blue, its continents alive with green. The air was pure. Too pure. His sensors found no orbital stations, no ships, no signs of an active civilization. Only weather control satellites and planetary monitoring systems. Humanity's home had become a nature reserve. His breath caught. The last hope of the Cineran people had led him to an empty world. Then space itself seemed to shiver. A shape appeared directly ahead, massive, sleek, and invisible until now. Another emerged to his right, then left, then above, below, and behind. In seconds, thousands of ships surrounded him. Their weapon signatures burned into his sensors like stars flaring to life. You have entered protected space. The voice didn't come through his comms. It spoke directly into his mind. I am Sigma. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or you will be eliminated. Every vessel locked weapons on him. Each one could destroy him before his thoughts could even register the attack. I am Paco of the Cineran people, he thought, forcing the words into the neural link. I seek humanity's help. Please, my people are dying. Your species is unknown, Sigma replied. This sector is restricted. Violation has only one outcome. More ships appeared, sealing every escape path. Terror pulsed through Paco's mind, the ship trembling in response. Please, he tried again, pushing raw desperation into the link. We heard the stories, everyone has. Humans protect the weak. They are the apex predators of the galaxy, but they use their power to help others. Are they still here? Can they help us? There was a pause. A long one. Paco's heart raced as the silence dragged on. Finally, Sigma spoke. Your neural patterns indicate truth. But you misunderstand. Earth is not humanity's residence. It is preserved as their cradle. Paco's stomach dropped. Then, they're gone. Amusement colored the thought that touched his mind. No. Humanity is very much alive. They simply no longer require planets. Would you like to meet them? The question hit him like a lifeline thrown into deep water. Yes, Paco whispered. Maintain your position. The weapons lock faded, but the ship stayed close, shifting formation to create a corridor through the stars. A gentler presence entered his mind, a subconsciousness, Sigma explained. This way. Paco's ship began to move without his command. The AI's guidance flowed through him as pure instinct, each burn and correction as natural as walking. Where do humans live if not on planets? They exist primarily in simulated worlds. Their physical bodies are preserved in stations orbiting red dwarf stars, the most stable energy sources. They return to physical form for creation, defense, and the raising of their young. They accelerated far beyond his ship's limits, his vessel subtly modified mid-flight. Space warped around them, distances folding in ways his mind barely comprehended. Why keep their bodies at all, he asked. They believe connection to their origins is vital to remain human. Without it, they could not truly understand or protect life. He saw wonders as they traveled, vast swarms of machines shaping asteroids, shepherding comets, maintaining the emptiness between stars as if it were a garden. There are 3 reasons humans awaken physically, the subconsciousness continued. To create something new. To respond to direct violations of protected spaces. And to aid an ally in ways machines cannot. Paco's heart quickened. Which am I? That remains to be seen. But Sigma has judged your case worthy of human attention. A red dwarf star grew in his view, its light dim but steady. Around it, stations the size of cities orbited in perfect geometric patterns. One was larger than all the rest. We will dock there. You will meet one who has recently awakened. The chosen station loomed ahead, its outer surface a living labyrinth. From a distance, it had looked solid. Up close, Paco saw that the entire structure shifted constantly, walls folding and unfolding, shapes rearranging themselves like a puzzle that never stopped solving itself. The environment is optimized for human biology, the subconsciousness explained. It is compatible with yours, but your neural interface will need enhancements to interact with its systems. Paco felt it happen, subtle adjustments to his mind link, then deeper changes. Awareness expanded, layers of perception opening like windows into hidden rooms. He began to sense not only the physical station, but the way it thought, the way it adjusted to every living presence within it. Are you ready? The subconsciousness asked. Yes, Paco answered, surprised to find he meant it. The docking bay opened, liquid metal walls flowing aside. Paco's ship drifted in, and the walls folded around it, scanning every molecule. Disconnect from the neural interface, the subconsciousness said. The station will provide environmental support. The suspension gel drained away. Paco's slender frame felt small without the ship's awareness wrapped around him. A section of the wall dissolved, revealing a corridor that breathed, its surface alive with moving patterns. The air was perfect, not warm, not cold, the exact mix of gases he needed. At the corridor's end waited a humanoid figure. It was clearly mechanical, silver-white and elegant, designed to match human proportions while remaining obviously artificial. "I am Sigma's physical avatar," it said, voice identical to the mind that had spoken to him near Earth. "Follow me." They moved through the station. The first chamber Paco glimpsed was filled with transparent spheres, each holding a developing human child. The next contained strange machinery shaping what might have been new bodies. "As I said," Sigma's voice explained, "humans raise their children physically before introducing them to simulated life. It preserves their connection to nature." Security checkpoints appeared not as walls or guards, but as strange moments where Paco's perception shifted, probability bending, reality adjusting. The station examined him on levels he couldn't begin to name. "Why so few humans here?" Paco asked. "Most space is for support systems," Sigma replied. "Humans are scattered across many stations, many stars. They cannot be destroyed as a species without destroying the galaxy itself." The architecture grew more organic. They entered a garden unlike anything Paco had imagined, plants from a world he'd never seen, rich scents making him feel alert yet calm. "This garden was designed by Matthew," Sigma said. "He believes organic beings communicate best in organic settings." The garden opened into a wide chamber that seemed to exist half in normal space, half beyond it. At the center stood a simple wooden table, worn smooth with age. "He will join us shortly," Sigma said. Paco sat, studying the air currents, the light tuned perfectly for both his species and human eyes. Then a presence touched his awareness, deep, layered, utterly unlike Sigma or the station. Footsteps approached. The human who entered looked both ordinary and impossible. Matthew was male, wearing simple clothes that seemed grown rather than made. His movements were unhurried yet carried absolute mastery of his body. But it was his eyes that struck Paco, eyes that held centuries of experience, compassion shaped by understanding both flesh and machine, and a power so great it seemed to rest lightly only by choice. "Welcome, Paco of the Sonaran people," Matthew said, voice calm and confident. "Sigma tells me your people need our help." Matthew sat across from him. The garden seemed to shift subtly toward the human, as though the plants themselves recognized him. "Tell me," Matthew said, "from your own words." Paco swallowed. "The Carano invaded 3 years ago. They are stronger, faster, more advanced. We fought, but we could not stop them. They have enslaved us, destroyed our cities." Matthew nodded once. "Show me." Without thinking, Paco opened his mind. Memories flowed, the Carano's massive furred forms, the burning cities, orbital bombardments, screaming refugees. Matthew absorbed it all in silence. The garden's patterns grew more complex, its air thicker with scent. "I see," Matthew said at last. "And you came because of the stories." "Yes," Paco admitted. "They say humans reached the peak of evolution, that you stopped wars, uplifted the weak. Some say you are gods. Others call you the immune system of the universe." Matthew smiled faintly. "We are not gods. We simply reached our potential earlier than most. And we learned hard lessons about power." "Are you, a general?" Paco asked. "I have been," Matthew said. "A long time ago. Now I am simply Matthew. And yes, we will free your homeworld. The only question is how." Paco's chest tightened. "Just like that? You'll help?" "Of course," Matthew said. "The Carano broke rules we enforce. We do not interfere in wars. But homeworld invasions? That we do not allow." He stood, motioning for Paco to follow. They entered a vast control center. The walls were transparent, showing the red dwarf star and the geometric spread of stations. Data flowed through the air like strands of light. "We will take your ship," Matthew said. My ship? Paco blinked. Wouldn't a human vessel be more powerful? Matthew's smile held the weight of deep wisdom. Your ship will do. The Carano should see who brought us to them. That matters. But don't worry, we won't travel alone. They returned to the docking bay. Paco's ship looked unchanged, until he touched its hull. Energy hummed beneath his hand, systems he had no names for woven into its frame. You built this well, Matthew said. We only helped it reach its full potential. The docking bay opened to the black. The red dwarf's light painted the station in fiery glow. Will you fit? Paco asked suddenly, remembering the cramped interior. Matthew laughed. Don't worry. Reality is flexible. Inside, the ship's interior was completely transformed, the neural interface now pulsing with possibility. Paco slid into the pilot's position and felt it embrace him. Matthew's presence flowed into the link, vast but contained. Let's go home, Paco said. Space folded around them. Stars bent and shifted as the ship leapt across distances in ways Paco couldn't fully see. Matthew sat in meditation, silent and still, while outside the universe twisted to their will. The transition out of folded space was so smooth Paco almost didn't notice it, until the view cleared and his heart sank. His homeworld hung before them, bathed in the pale glow of its twin stars. But it was scarred beyond recognition. Cities that had once flowed like art across the landscape were now jagged ruins. The Carano had built fortress outposts over the bones of Sonoran architecture, their brutal, blocky structures a mockery of the graceful towers that had stood for centuries. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Paco saw his people scattered in refugee camps, trapped between the wreckage of their homes and the walls of Carano command centers. There, Paco said, pointing to the largest complex. That's the primary command center for this region. The local overseer controls everything from there, slave labor, patrols, raids. Matthew's eyes moved over the image, calm and precise. 10 warriors in the immediate area, he said, almost to himself. Before Paco could ask how he knew, the ship descended. No alarms triggered. No defense systems reacted. It was as if they weren't there at all. They landed in what had once been the village square, Paco's village, now stripped bare and turned into a Carano training yard. The massive warriors were slow to notice the small ship materializing in the dust. Matthew rose from his seat. Stay here, he told Paco. Watch, and understand why we choose to keep physical form. The ship's hatch opened, and Matthew stepped out into the sunlight. Against the Carano, he looked absurdly small, a man barely reaching their shoulders, facing soldiers whose furred bodies were built like living siege engines. The first Carano spotted him, bellowing a challenge in their rough language. A plasma rifle rose in massive hands, its capacitors charging. Matthew didn't move. His voice, clear and carrying, cut across the square. Your species has violated principles we maintain. You will withdraw from Sonoran space immediately. The Carano overseer emerged from the command center, a mountain of fur and armor. His ceremonial plating gleamed in the sun, marked with scars of battle. He laughed, deep and ugly. Do you know who you are speaking to, little? He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed, something like recognition flashing across his face. Who are you? I am human, Matthew said simply. And you have one chance to leave peacefully. The overseer's reply was a thunderous roar. His shoulder cannon fired, a blast powerful enough to punch through starship hull plating. It crossed the space between them instantly. But when it struck, Matthew wasn't there. Paco's neural interface strained to track what happened. One moment, Matthew was in front of the overseer. The next, he was at the giant's side, his hand resting lightly on the alien's armor. The overseer's massive body dropped like a felled tree, his nervous system shut down in an instant. The other Carano roared and opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the air like miniature suns. Matthew moved between them like water flowing between stones. Every step, every turn was precise, almost lazy, if not for the speed. One warrior collapsed. Then another. And another. In less than 10 seconds, all 10 Carano in the square lay unconscious on the dust. Matthew glanced down at the fallen overseer. "You will withdraw from Sonaran space," he said, his voice calm. Then he pressed his palm to the alien's forehead. Paco saw it through the sensors, the contact linked directly to the overseer's neural implants. A transmission pulsed outward, faster than light, carrying not just words but the full sensory memory of what had just happened. Every Carano in the galaxy would feel the moment their leader had been taken down without a single shot fired in return. And they would know this was the gentle version. Matthew turned back toward the ship, walking with the same unhurried grace. "You didn't even use a weapon," Paco said as Matthew stepped aboard. "These were just nanites," Matthew replied, almost casually. "Don't worry about it. This was only the beginning." From above, a shadow fell over the square. Paco looked up through the sensors, and his breath caught. Something massive had decloaked in orbit, blotting out the light of the smaller star. A ship so large it could have been mistaken for a drifting continent. Around it, thousands of smaller vessels emerged from invisibility, drones, combat platforms, and other constructs Paco couldn't name. "For a planetary liberation," Matthew said, "we'll use all the tools available." The next hours blurred together. Matthew directed the fleet with gestures so small they seemed meaningless, yet each one triggered cascading waves of action across the planet. Carano fortresses fell in silence. Orbital platforms were rendered inert by drones that appeared inside their shields. Ground forces found their weapons dissolving into harmless metal dust. The Sonaran people emerged from hiding, drawn by the sight of their oppressors fleeing in confusion. Above, the human fleet moved with the precision of a living organism, every vessel in perfect synchronization. When the Carano leadership finally demanded to speak, it was on neutral ground, a stripped, silent plain where the twin suns cast long shadows. The chief commander stood waiting, armor still scarred from human weaponry. He barely looked at Matthew as the human approached. "You will withdraw from all Sonaran territory," Matthew said, his tone flat and factual. "You will pay reparations according to the terms my systems are transmitting. And you will never again attempt the conquest of another species' homeworld." The commander's jaw tightened. "And if we refuse?" Matthew's eyes hardened. "Then I stop holding back. What you have seen today was not a military response. It was a diplomatic one. Please, don't make me show you the difference." The Carano didn't answer with words. His eyes flicked upward, to the massive shadow in orbit, and then he bowed his head. The surrender began within the hour. The formal surrender spread across the Carano Empire like a cold wind. Orders rippled through their command network, instructing every garrison, every outpost, to abandon Sonaran territory. Paco watched the withdrawals through the ship's enhanced sensors, huge warships accelerating out of orbit, ground units marching toward waiting transports, the dark silhouettes of their fortresses emptying one by one. Above, the human fleet did not relax. The great ship in orbit remained motionless, casting its shadow like a warning. Drones swept across the skies, verifying every departure. Other constructs descended into the ruins, carrying machines that began the impossible task of repairing a world broken by years of occupation. "They'll leave, just like that?" Paco asked quietly. Matthew's gaze stayed on the tactical displays. "They'll leave," he said. "Our message was clear. And if they don't, the systems I've seeded into their networks will remind them of their choice." Paco hesitated. "You mean, weapons?" "Influence," Matthew replied. "Every ship, every command node, every implant now carries a shadow process. If they violate the terms, they will find themselves frozen before they can even raise a weapon." Paco shivered. It wasn't cruelty, it was precision. On the ground, the Sonaran people stepped cautiously into the light. Many looked up in disbelief, seeing the Carano gone and the sky filled instead with ships they had no name for. Children pointed at the drones that floated past, their sleek forms scanning rubble and laying foundations in the same movement. "These reconstruction units will work faster than anything your people have seen," Matthew said. "Within 2 weeks, your cities will be livable again. Within 2 months, they will be better than they were before. You're giving us all this?" Paco asked, staring at the streams of nanites flowing into the cracked streets, reforming them like water freezing into glass. "We don't give," Matthew corrected gently. "We invest. We help those who help themselves. The Carano destroyed your infrastructure. We'll rebuild it. What you build after that, is up to you." They moved over the planet in a silent sweep. Matthew insisted on visiting each major settlement personally. In some, the Carano had left recently enough that the air still smelled of their presence. In others, the people had been hiding underground so long their skin had paled to ghostly blue. At every stop, Matthew spoke directly to the survivors. His words were calm, almost understated, but Paco could feel the effect they had. Despair loosened its grip. Eyes that had been hollow began to hold light again. In one village, a young Sinaran boy approached the human without fear, offering a small, hand-carved charm. Matthew accepted it without hesitation, fastening it to a cord around his wrist. Paco realized then that Matthew's power didn't come only from the fleet, or the technology, or even his physical skill. It came from the way he carried all that strength without arrogance, as if it were simply the right thing to use it for others. The Carano commander who had signed the surrender returned once more, this time under guard. His great frame was still imposing, but his eyes were wary. He stood in the newly cleared square of the Sinaran capital, surrounded by machines and drones quietly rebuilding towers around him. "We didn't know," the commander said, his deep voice edged with something like shame. "The stories, we thought they were exaggerations. We thought humans were only myths to frighten children." Matthew regarded him for a moment, then said, "They were never myths. They were warnings. You were given a chance to believe without testing them. You chose poorly." The Carano's head bowed slightly. "And now? Now you do better," Matthew said simply. "Leave here. Focus on your own worlds. If you need help, ask for it. But never again take what is not yours." When the commander left, escorted back to his waiting transport, Paco realized something: there had been no hatred in Matthew's voice. No vengeance. Only a statement of fact. By the third day, the last Carano ships were gone. The drones spread wider, repairing old power grids, clearing poisoned water supplies, planting forests where battle had burned the land to ash. The great human ship still hung in orbit, though most of the smaller vessels had vanished, cloaked again, or perhaps gone entirely. Only a few remained in plain sight, as if to remind the stars themselves that the planet was under protection now. Paco and Matthew walked together through the half-repaired streets of the capital. The air was cleaner than Paco had ever remembered it. New towers rose at the edges of his vision, their designs echoing Sinaran style but built with materials far beyond anything his people could produce. "You said once that humans only awaken for 3 reasons, Paco said. Why us? Why now?" Matthew's gaze swept the horizon. "Because your people were not conquered through weakness. You fought. You resisted. And you still had the courage to ask for help instead of surrendering. That matters." Paco was quiet for a moment, then said, "And when the rebuilding is done?" "Then we leave," Matthew said. "You won't see us again unless you need us. But you'll know we're out there." He glanced up at the massive ship in orbit. "And so will anyone else who thinks to test you." 2 weeks after the last Carano warship vanished beyond the edge of Sinaran space, the planet no longer looked like a world that had been conquered. The ruins were gone, replaced by towers of crystal and alloy, streets that seemed to hum with life, and power systems so clean they left the air tasting fresh after rain. Everywhere Paco went, people worked alongside the silent human drones. Families were moving back into rebuilt homes. Markets were reopening. Children laughed in streets that had been silent for years. And every so often, someone would look up, to the enormous human vessel still hanging in orbit, and smile with a mix of gratitude and awe. It was nearly time for the humans to leave. Paco stood with Matthew on a terrace overlooking the rebuilt capital. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and violet. "I don't know how to thank you," Paco said quietly. Matthew shook his head. "I told you before, you repay us by building something worth protecting. You have your world back. What you do with it is your choice. Make it count." They walked down toward the square, where a crowd had gathered. Some came to see the human who had freed them. Others came simply because they wanted to be near the moment, to feel that they were part of it. When Matthew stepped forward, the crowd fell silent. His voice carried without effort. "You have endured loss," he said. "You have seen cruelty. And you have survived it. That means you are stronger now, not because of us, but because of you. We gave you space to stand. What you build from here will be your legacy, not ours." There was no speech about repayment. No demand for loyalty. Only a reminder of choice. Paco realized that was why the galaxy feared the humans, not only for what they could destroy, but for what they could inspire. After the gathering, Paco followed Matthew back toward the landing platform. The human ship's hatch stood open, waiting. Above them, the great vessel in orbit shifted, preparing to break position. The smaller drones that had remained in plain sight rose from the city like a cloud of silver birds, vanishing into the sky. The Carano commander had been true to his word. No scout ships had returned to test the humans' resolve. Word had spread too far and too fast. In distant sectors, even species who had never seen a human before now whispered the same thing: "They're awake." At the platform, Paco hesitated. "When you go, will we be able to reach you again?" Matthew smiled faintly. "If you need us, we'll know. But I hope you don't. A galaxy that calls for us too often is a galaxy in trouble." He extended his hand. Paco took it without hesitation. The human's grip was warm, solid, but behind it was something far greater, the quiet, contained weight of a being who could change the fate of worlds in a single afternoon. Matthew stepped into the ship. Paco watched the hatch seal, the hum of its systems merging with the low song of the docking platform. Then, with a soundless surge, the ship lifted, climbing toward the stars. In orbit, the great human vessel turned, light flashing across its surface like a ripple of thought. The moment it crossed the shadow line, it seemed to fade, not cloaking, but slipping away, as though space itself allowed it passage no one else could take. The sky was empty again. But it didn't feel empty. Word of the event spread faster than light. In the cycles that followed, Paco heard fragments from travelers and traders, tales of Carano fleets retreating from border worlds without a fight, of warlords pausing mid-conquest and choosing diplomacy instead, of ancient rivalries cooling overnight. None of them had seen the humans. None of them had to. The idea alone was enough. The Sonaran people began adding a new phrase to their language, a simple one, spoken when danger seemed near but hope remained: "They're watching." Paco returned to his ship weeks later, the neural interface now fully repaired but no longer linked to Matthew's presence. The system's Sigma had left in place hummed with quiet potential. He knew he might never again travel to the places he had seen, never again walk the living corridors of a human station, but that was fine. The journey had given him something even more valuable. As he lifted off from the rebuilt capital and looked down on the shining city, he thought of the stories that had brought him across the galaxy. They had been right about the human strength. But they had been wrong about something else. They weren't dormant gods. They were guardians who chose to sleep until the moment their presence mattered most, and when they woke, the universe remembered who held the balance of power. Far above, among the stars, something stirred at the edge of Paco's senses. Not a signal, not a message. Just the faintest pulse of awareness, like a hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the galaxy. Watching. Waiting.